She's just a housewife. Once the papers are signed, we can finally run the company how it should be run. Natalie's voice drifted through the cracked office door. I froze in the hallway, my hand clutching the surprise lunch I'd brought for Tom. 15 years of marriage. And this was how I discovered the truth. Overhearing my husband's mistress dismissing my entire existence while they plotted to remove me from the company I helped build. Becca hasn't been involved in day-to-day operations for years, Tom replied, his voice taking on that smooth, persuasive tone he used with difficult clients. She won't even read the documents before signing. Trust me, by next quarter, Wilson Creative will be completely ours to run. I stood there, lunch bag dangling from my suddenly numb fingers, as the carefully constructed reality of my life crumbled around me. Tom and I had started the agency together right after college. While he became the charming face of Wilson Creative Group, I had worked tirelessly behind the scenes before stepping back to raise our children. But my name was still on every founding document, a detail they were clearly planning to erase. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I didn't confront them then. Something inside me, perhaps pride, perhaps self-preservation, made me quietly back away from the door. I placed the lunch bag on Heather's desk with a note saying I'd stopped by, then walked calmly through the modern open office space that housed the 28 employees of Wilson Creative Group. The Portland skyline stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Willamette River gleaming in the distance. This view, this office, I had chosen everything from the location to the furniture. I had interviewed the first 10 employees. Now Natalie Parker, the ambitious account executive Tom had hired 3 years ago, was calling me just a housewife, while planning to help my husband push me out of my own company. At home, I moved through the rest of the day on autopilot. I helped our teenagers with homework, prepared dinner, and maintained the carefully cultivated image of the perfect wife and mother. When Tom came home late, as he had increasingly over the past year, I greeted him with a practiced smile, swallowing the bitter questions that threatened to spill out. "You're home late again," I said, keeping my voice neutral as I handed him a glass of the Pinot Noir he preferred. "Big pitch tomorrow," he replied, loosening his tie. The Dawson account could take the agency to the next level. I nodded, remembering. When we used to prepare for big pitches together, staying up late brainstorming ideas, challenging each other to think bigger and bolder. Now, apparently, he had Natalie for that, and more. That night, once Tom was asleep, I slipped into our home office and opened my laptop. As just a housewife, I supposedly knew nothing about business, but they had forgotten one crucial fact. I had been the one to set up all our company's original systems and passwords years ago. Tom, always impatient with administrative details, had never bothered to change many of them. My hands trembled slightly as I logged into the company's cloud storage. There they were, drafts of new ownership documents buried in a folder labeled Restructuring. The paperwork would effectively dilute my 50% ownership down to a meaningless 5%, with special provisions that would remove my voting rights entirely. The documents were scheduled to be presented to me for signing next week, on our wedding anniversary. The cruel irony made my stomach clench. I closed the laptop and stared out at the shadowed outline of the West Hills neighborhood around our Craftsman home. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, a company we'd built from nothing but a shared dream and determination. All of it based on a foundation that was now revealing itself to be nothing but quicksand. The next morning, after Tom left for work, I called the one person I knew I could trust completely. "Claire, I need to see you. It's important," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Claire Rodriguez had been my best friend since college. While I had chosen marriage and entrepreneurship, she had pursued a career in corporate marketing. Now she was a VP at one of Portland's largest firms, respected, throughout the industry for her strategic mind and unwavering integrity. 2 hours later, we sat in a back corner of Evergreen Coffee House, far from the usual business crowd that frequented downtown establishments. He's what? Claire's normally composed face registered shock as I detailed what I'd discovered. And with Natalie Parker, isn't she like 12? She's 29, I replied, stirring my untouched latte. And apparently, she's much more than just an account executive now. Claire's shock quickly transformed into calculated anger. Please tell me you've made copies of everything. I nodded. Everything's backed up on a secure drive. But I don't know what to do next. If I confront Tom, he'll just deny it or try to manipulate me into signing anyway. Claire leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. Becca, listen to me. You're not just Tom's wife, and you're certainly not just a housewife. You're a founding partner of a successful agency. Your name is on those incorporation documents. Your ideas and sweat built that company just as much as his did. But I've been out of the daily operations for years now, I said, echoing Tom's words from the conversation I'd overheard. By choice, to raise your children. That doesn't erase your legal rights, Claire countered. But this isn't just about business law. We need to understand exactly what Tom's been doing with the company finances while you've been focused on family. Claire was right. I needed expertise beyond just moral support. Do you still keep in touch with Dan Chen from business school? I asked. Claire smiled. The financial wizard himself? Absolutely. He has his own consulting firm now, specializing in forensic accounting. Should I call him? By late afternoon, the three of us were gathered in Dan's sleek downtown office. His walls were lined with financial certifications, and his desk was meticulously organized, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos I was experiencing. First, things first, Dan said, after I'd explained the situation. We need to understand the complete financial picture before making any moves, not just the company's official statements, but any hidden accounts or transactions Tom might have established. How do we do that? I asked. I'll need access to as many financial records as you can get me, personal and business. Bank, statements, tax returns, investment accounts, everything. You said you still have some of the original passwords? I nodded. Good, that's a start. But we'll also need to establish a clear timeline of when things changed. When did Tom start? Staying late? When did he hire Natalie? When did financial decisions start happening without your knowledge? As Dan spoke, a strange sense of clarity began to replace my initial shock and hurt. This wasn't just about my husband's betrayal anymore. It was about protecting what was rightfully mine, what I had helped build before stepping back to raise our family. There's something else, I said, remembering a detail that had seemed insignificant until now. About 6 months ago, Tom insisted we refinance our house to take advantage of lower interest rates. He handled all the paperwork. Dan and Claire exchanged knowing looks. We need to check if he's been leveraging personal assets to fund something off the books, Dan said. It's unfortunately common in cases like this. And you'll need legal representation, Claire added. Someone specialized in both business law and divorce proceedings, because let's be honest, Becca, this marriage is over. The blunt truth of Claire's words hit me hard. Yes, the marriage was over. Had been for longer than I'd been willing to admit to myself. But the company, our company, that was something I wasn't prepared to surrender. I know someone, I said, thinking of Stephanie Morris, an attorney whose children attended the same private school as ours. We weren't close friends, but I'd always admired her reputation for being both brilliant and brutally effective. But everything we do needs to stay completely quiet for now. Tom can't know I'm aware of anything until we're fully prepared. Claire squeezed my hand. Absolutely. As far as Tom knows, you're just continuing your role as the perfect wife and homemaker while he and his mistress plot behind your back. Which reminds me, Dan interjected, You should maintain all regular routines. Don't give any indication that something's changed. In fact, you might want to be even more agreeable than usual. I managed a small smile. I can do that. I've had plenty of practice playing the supportive wife. Over the next week, I lived a double life that would have impressed any spy. By day, I continued my regular routines, managing our home, attending school functions, preparing Tom's favorite meals, and smiling pleasantly whenever he mentioned big changes coming soon at the agency. By night, I worked with my growing team of allies, uncovering the true extent of Tom's betrayal. Stephanie Morris had agreed to represent me immediately after hearing the basics of my situation. Her addition completed our core team, Claire with her industry knowledge, Dan with his financial expertise, and Stephanie with her legal acumen. What we discovered shocked even Stephanie, who thought she'd seen it all in her 15 years of practice. He's been systematically moving company assets into a new corporate entity. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dan explained during a late-night strategy session in Stephanie's office. Spreadsheets and financial documents covered every available surface. The new company, Parker Wilson Strategies, was registered 6 months ago with Tom owning 60% and Natalie owning 40%. That's when they started working on the Dawson account, I realized. They're planning to take Wilson Creative's biggest potential client to their new company. Exactly, Dan confirmed. And they've been using Wilson Creative's resources, staff time, office space, even expense accounts, to build this new business on the side. Stephanie made notes as Dan spoke. Classic case of usurping corporate opportunities and breach of fiduciary duty. But it gets worse. She slid a document across the table to me. They've been depreciating Wilson Creative's value through targeted client attrition. Basically, they've been intentionally letting certain valuable client relationships deteriorate, so they can swoop in with their new company and save them. The systematic nature of their betrayal made my blood boil. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated business coup orchestrated by my husband and his mistress. What about the house refinancing? I asked, dreading the answer. Dan's expression told me everything before he spoke. Tom took out $300,000 in equity from your home. The money was transferred to an LLC that then made a loan to Parker Wilson Strategies for their startup costs. I felt physically ill. He used our home, the home where our children grew up, to fund his exit strategy with Natalie? Claire, who had been quietly reviewing client files, looked up. Wait, there's more. The Robertson account. Isn't that your friend Eleanor's company? I nodded. Eleanor Reed had been one of my personal friends who had become Wilson Creative's client years ago. Her sustainable clothing company had grown alongside our agency. According to these emails, Tom and Natalie met with Eleanor last month, supposedly to discuss a refresh of her marketing strategy. But it looks like they were actually pitching her to move to their new company once it launches. That felt like the final straw. Using my personal relationships for their scheme crossed yet another line I hadn't imagined even Tom would cross. So what do we do? I asked, looking at Stephanie. What's our strategy? Stephanie leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. We've been building the evidence for both your divorce case and what I'd call a corporate rescue operation. Oh, but timing is everything. Tom still doesn't know you've discovered any of this, correct? I nodded. As far as he knows, I'm completely in the dark. In fact, he's planning a special anniversary dinner next week where I'm sure he'll try to get me to sign those restructuring documents. Perfect, Stephanie said. That gives us time for the final preparations. Here's what we're going to do. The plan Stephanie outlined was bold and would require precise execution. But if successful, it would not only protect my interests, but expose Tom and Natalie's unethical behavior to everyone who mattered in Portland's business community. The next day, I made a crucial phone call to Greg Campbell, Tom's business partner who owned the remaining 10% of Wilson Creative Group. Greg had always been the quieter, more operations-focused counterpart to Tom's charismatic sales persona. We'd never been close, but I'd always respected his integrity. "Greg, it's Rebecca Wilson. I need to speak with you privately. It's about the future of the agency." We met at a small restaurant in a neighboring suburb, far from anywhere Tom or his associates might spot us. When I laid out the evidence of what Tom and Natalie were planning, including how they intended to marginalize Greg's role in the restructured company, his normally impassive face flushed with anger. "I had suspicions," he admitted. "Client? Meetings I wasn't invited to. Financial reports delayed. But I never imagined it went this far. I need to know where you stand, Greg. Are you with Tom, or are you willing to help save the company we all built?" Greg didn't hesitate. "I'm with the company, Rebecca. Always have been. What do you need me to do?" His support was the final piece we needed. With Greg's help, we could access operational aspects of the business that even my old passwords couldn't reach. More importantly, his testimony would be crucial when the time came. As our anniversary dinner approached, everything was in place. I spent the day at an exclusive spa, Tom's gift to me, getting myself prepared both physically and mentally for what would come next. When I returned home, I found Tom in our bedroom, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes appreciative as they took in my carefully selected outfit and professionally applied makeup. "Ready for a night to remember?" If only he knew how memorable it would truly be. "Absolutely," I replied with a warm smile. 15 years is quite a milestone. Tom drove us to Waterfront Bistro, Portland's most exclusive restaurant, where he'd reserved a private dining room overlooking the river. I noted but didn't comment on the fact that Heather, his assistant, had called me yesterday to confirm all the arrangements, a task that would typically fall outside her normal responsibilities. Another piece of evidence that Tom was mixing business and personal matters inappropriately. The private room contained not just a dining table set for an intimate dinner, but also a small side table with what looked suspiciously like business documents waiting. Tom had actually brought the restructuring papers to our anniversary dinner. The audacity almost made me laugh. "Champagne to start?" Tom suggested as we were seated, already signaling the hovering server. "Actually," I said, checking my watch, "let's wait just a few minutes. I took the liberty of inviting some guests to join us for a toast before our private dinner." Tom's smile faltered. "Guests?" "Becca, I arranged this as a special evening for just us." "Don't worry," I replied calmly. "They won't stay long." Right on cue, the private room's door opened. Tom's face went from confused to shocked as Claire walked in, followed by Dan, Stephanie, and finally Greg. Each carried what looked like gift bags, anniversary presents to any observer, but I knew they contained copies of all the evidence we had accumulated. "What is this?" Tom asked, his composed demeanor beginning to crack. "Just a few friends helping us celebrate," I said pleasantly. After all, 15 years of marriage is significant. Almost as significant as the 10 years of Wilson Creative Group, which we're also celebrating this year. The door opened again, and the final guest entered, Eleanor Reed, looking elegant and formidable in her signature sustainable fashion. Tom's face paled visibly at the sight of her. "Eleanor, what a surprise," he managed, rising awkwardly from his seat. "Tom," she acknowledged coolly before turning to me with genuine warmth. "Rebecca, congratulations on your anniversary." I stood and embraced her. "Thank you for coming, Eleanor. I believe you already know everyone here?" Tom's eyes darted between the assembled group, calculation and growing alarm evident in his expression. He reached for my arm, attempting to guide me away from the others. "Becca, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" "No need for privacy among friends and colleagues," I replied, maintaining my pleasant tone. Especially when we have business to discuss. Business? Tom's voice rose slightly. This is our anniversary dinner. Yes, and you brought restructuring documents to have me sign, I said, gesturing to the side table where the papers lay. So clearly you intended to mix business with pleasure tonight. The blood drained from Tom's face as he realized I knew exactly what he had planned. His eyes flicked to the door as if calculating an escape route. But Greg had positioned himself, casually but effectively, as a barrier. I think we should all sit down, I suggested, motioning to the table that could easily accommodate our unexpected guests. I've taken the liberty of ordering a selection of appetizers to accompany our discussion. As everyone took their seats, leaving Tom increasingly isolated, I opened my purse and removed a single document, placing it precisely in front of him. Before we look at your restructuring proposal, I thought you might want to review this alternate vision for Wilson Creative Group's future. Tom glanced down at the document, then did a double-take as he began to read. It was a comprehensive outline for a new organizational structure, one where I would return as active CEO, Greg would become COO, and Tom would have no place at all. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, pushing the paper away. You've been out of the business for years. You can't just walk back in and… Actually, she can, Stephanie interjected smoothly. As 50% owner and founding partner with all her control provisions intact, Rebecca has every legal right to resume an active role in the company she helped create. And as the other equity partner, Greg added, I fully support this restructuring plan. Tom's eyes narrowed as he looked from face to face, finally settling on me. So, this is a coup. You've all been conspiring behind my back. The irony of his accusation might have been funny if the situation weren't so serious. I leaned forward, keeping my voice level despite the anger and hurt simmering beneath the surface. No, Tom. This is accountability. We know about Parker Wilson's strategies. We know about the diverted clients, the misused company resources, and the equity you took from our family home to fund your exit strategy with Natalie. With each point I made, Tom seemed to physically shrink in his chair. The confident, charismatic businessman was crumbling before our eyes. You can't prove any of that, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Dan smiled thinly. Actually, we have documented every transaction, every diverted opportunity, and every breach of fiduciary duty. Would you like to see the spreadsheets? I'm quite proud of them. Eleanor, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. I was rather surprised, Tom, when you and Natalie pitched me to move my business to your new venture, especially since Rebecca was the one who originally brought my company to Wilson Creative. Did you really think I wouldn't mention it to her? Tom's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. This is a misunderstanding. No, I cut him off firmly. This is the consequence of your choices. You and Natalie thought I was just a housewife who wouldn't notice or fight back when you tried to take what we built together. You were wrong. I slid another document across the table. These are your options. Option 1, you resign from Wilson Creative Group immediately, relinquish all claims to company assets and clients, and we handle this transition quietly. Option 2, we take everything we've discovered to the industry association, your clients, and if necessary, the authorities. The silence that followed was deafening. Tom stared at the document, then at me, searching for any sign of weakening resolve. He found none. What about us? He finally asked, gesturing vaguely between us. 15 years, Becca. That's being handled separately, I replied, my voice softening slightly despite my best efforts. Stephanie has already drafted the divorce papers. You'll find them quite generous considering the circumstances, provided you make the right choice about the business. Tom looked around the table one last time, perhaps hoping to find an ally, but was met with only resolute faces. Finally, his shoulders sagged in defeat. I'll need to review these with my own attorney, he said, gathering what remained of his dignity. Of course, Stephanie replied professionally. You have 48 hours. As our unexpected guests discreetly exited, leaving Tom and me alone in the private dining room that was supposed to host our anniversary celebration, an awkward silence descended. When did you know? He finally asked. I overheard you and Natalie at the office last week. You really should be more careful about closed doors when you're plotting corporate takeovers. Tom winced. And all of this, he gestured to the documents, you put together in just a week? I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. It turns out, just a housewife can accomplish quite a lot when properly motivated. The server appeared, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded, to ask if we were ready to order dinner. Actually, I said, standing and gathering my purse. I think we're finished here. The celebration is over. As I walked out of the restaurant alone, I felt a strange mix of sadness for what was ending and exhilaration for what was beginning. Tomorrow, I would return to Wilson Creative Group not as Tom's wife, but as its CEO and rightful owner. Housewife was going back to work. And this time, no one would ever underestimate me again. The next morning, I made breakfast as usual, kissed Tom goodbye with practiced affection, and then began my covert operation in earnest. While our children were at school, I combed through every file cabinet and storage box in our home office. Years of tax returns, investment statements, property records. I photographed everything, creating a detailed financial history of our life together. In a dusty box of keepsakes, I found something that made my breath catch, the original business plan for Wilson Creative Group, handwritten on yellow legal pads in both Tom's handwriting and mine. Our signatures side by side on every page, documenting our equal partnership at the company's inception. I took special care photographing these, making sure every page was clearly legible. That afternoon, I drove to the bank where we kept our safe deposit box. As Tom's wife, I had full access. Inside were property deeds, insurance policies, and most importantly, the original incorporation documents for Wilson Creative Group. I didn't remove anything that might alert Tom, but I photographed every page, my hands steady with newfound purpose. By the time I met with Stephanie Morris the following day, I had assembled a comprehensive financial history of both our personal assets and the company's evolution. Claire came with me for moral support, sitting quietly in the corner of Stephanie's office while I laid out my situation. Stephanie listened without interruption, her sharp eyes occasionally narrowing at particularly damning details. When I finished, she nodded once, decisively. You've done excellent preliminary work, Rebecca, she said, using my full name in a way that somehow made me feel more confident. Most clients come to me with emotion, but no evidence. You've brought both. So, I have a case? I asked. You have several cases, Stephanie replied, leaning forward. A divorce case with clear evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct. A business case for breach of fiduciary duty. And potentially, depending on what Dan's analysis reveals, a case for fraudulent misappropriation of company resources. The legal terminology should have been intimidating, but instead, I found it oddly comforting. There were names for what Tom had done. There were processes to address it. There were consequences he would face. What's our next step? I asked. We need to move quickly but strategically, Stephanie said. Tom's planning to have you sign those restructuring documents next week, which gives us a clear deadline. I'll need you to sign these engagement letters authorizing me to act on your behalf, then we'll coordinate with Dan to follow the money trail. As I signed the documents making Stephanie officially my attorney, I felt a weight lift. I was no longer facing this betrayal alone. I had professionals in my corner who knew exactly how to fight back. One more thing, Stephanie added as Claire and I prepared to leave. From this moment forward, assume that Tom is monitoring your activities. Use a new email account he doesn't know about, pay for any services in cash, and if possible, get a prepaid phone for communications related to our work together. The cloak and dagger nature of her instructions might have seemed excessive if I hadn't discovered my husband's elaborate deception just days earlier. As it was, I simply nodded and added burner phone to my mental to-do list. That evening, Tom called to say he'd be working late again. I kept my voice light and unbothered as I assured him I'd save him a plate from dinner. After hanging up, I texted Claire from my new prepaid phone. He's with her again tonight. Perfect time to access his home office files. Claire replied immediately. Dan says focus on any external hard drives or thumb drives. Also, check credit. Card statements. People get careless with those. For the next 3 hours, while my children did homework upstairs, I systematically searched Tom's home office. In the false bottom of his desk drawer, an addition he'd made last year that I wasn't supposed to know about, I found a small safe. Fortunately, Tom had always been predictable with passwords and combinations. Our children's birthdays didn't work, but his own did. Inside was a portable hard drive and a stack of receipts held together with a paperclip. I photographed each, receipt in detail, noting with growing anger that many were for expensive restaurants and hotels in Portland, places he'd claimed were for client meetings. One receipt in particular caught my eye, a jewelry store charge for a platinum bracelet dated just 3 weeks earlier. He'd spent nearly $5,000 on Natalie while telling me we needed to tighten our belts for the children's college funds. I couldn't risk taking the hard drive itself, but I carefully connected it to my laptop and copied its contents to a secure cloud storage account Dan had set up. The process seemed to take forever, each percentage point of the progress bar crawling by as I listened anxiously for the sound of Tom's car in the driveway. When the transfer finally completed, I returned everything to its exact place, made sure the false bottom of the drawer was properly secured, and erased all traces of my digital. Snooping from my laptop's history, I was just settling on the living room couch with a book I wasn't actually reading when I heard Tom's key in the front door. "Hey," he said, looking tired but somehow energized in that way people do when they're running on adrenaline and excitement. "Sorry I'm so late. The Dawson presentation is taking everything we've got." "I understand," I replied, amazed at how easily the lies came to my lips now. "There's a plate for you in the fridge. How's it coming along?" "We're close to something brilliant," Tom said, loosening his tie as he headed for the kitchen. Natalie had an insight about their market positioning that completely changed our approach. I bet she did, I thought, but outwardly I just nodded, with appropriate interest. "That's wonderful. I'm sure you'll win the account." "With what we're putting together, it's practically a done deal," Tom said, his confidence bordering on arrogance. The microwave hummed as he heated his dinner. "By the way, I've got a surprise planned for our anniversary next week. Keep Thursday evening free." "The whole evening?" I asked, thinking of the restructuring documents he planned to have me sign. "Definitely. I've made reservations at La Fontaine at 8, but I thought we might start with drinks somewhere first." La Fontaine was Portland's most exclusive restaurant, requiring reservations weeks in advance. The perfect place for a public celebration, or a setting where I would feel too awkward to make a scene when presented with business documents to sign. I had to admire his calculated approach, even as it revolted me. "Sounds wonderful," I said, giving him my best smile. "I can't believe it's been 15 years. "Neither can I," Tom replied, and for just a moment, I caught something in his expression. Not guilt exactly, but perhaps the faintest recognition of what he was about to destroy. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual self-assured smile. It's been quite a journey. Indeed it had. And he had no idea how different the destination would be from what he was planning. The next morning, I sent the copied files from Tom's hard drive to Dan through the secure channel he'd established. By afternoon, he had called an emergency meeting at his office. "This is worse than we thought," Dan said without preamble, as Claire, Stephanie, and I gathered around his conference table. He turned his monitor so we could all see the spreadsheet displayed there. Tom hasn't just been planning to dilute your ownership, Rebecca. He's been actively diverting company resources to set up a competing agency. What? The betrayal felt fresh all over again. Dan pointed to several highlighted entries on the spreadsheet. These expenses, charged to Wilson Creative, are actually startup costs for a new venture called Parker Wilson Strategic Design. He incorporated it 6 months ago with Natalie Parker listed as co-founder and chief creative officer. That's when he had me refinance the house, I realized, the timing suddenly making perfect sense. Exactly, Dan confirmed. And guess where $200,000 of that equity went? Directly into the new company's operating account. The sheer audacity of it staggered me. Tom hadn't just been cheating with Natalie. They'd been systematically planning to leave Wilson Creative as an empty shell while transferring its most valuable clients and intellectual property to their new venture. There's more, Dan continued grimly. Based on these files, they've already approached at least 5 of Wilson Creative's biggest clients about moving their accounts to the new agency once it formally launches, which, according to this timeline, is scheduled for 2 weeks after you sign those restructuring documents. Stephanie, who had been taking detailed notes, looked up sharply. This goes beyond breach of fiduciary duty. This is corporate theft and fraud. He's using our family home to finance his new life with her, I said, a cold fury replacing my initial shock. Our children's security, our retirement savings, all of it diverted to fund his exit strategy. Claire, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. We need to move faster than we planned. If they've already approached clients, word could get back to Tom that you're investigating. We can't risk him accelerating his timeline. Stephanie nodded in agreement. We need to secure temporary injunctions immediately to freeze the assets of this new company and prevent any further client solicitation. But won't that tip our hand? I asked. Once legal proceedings start, Tom will know I've discovered everything. Not necessarily, Stephanie replied thoughtfully. I can file the initial paperwork under seal, citing potential business espionage concerns. That might buy us a few more days before Tom is officially notified. But we'll need to act immediately. Dan was already pulling up another document on his computer. There's one more person we need to consider in all this. Gregory Campbell. According to these records, he still owns 10% of Wilson Creative, but he's been completely cut out of Tom and Natalie's new venture. He might be a valuable ally. I considered this new angle. Greg had been part of Wilson Creative almost from the beginning, joining as our first employee and eventually earning partnership status through years of dedicated work. Tom had always maintained a somewhat dismissive attitude toward Greg's more methodical approach to business, but I had always appreciated his thoroughness and integrity. I haven't spoken to Greg in months, I admitted. Tom gradually pushed him to the operational side, while Tom himself handled all client relationships. Strategic isolation, Claire observed. Classic move when you're planning to push someone out. Keep them busy with internal matters while you control all external relationships. Do you think he knows what Tom's been planning? I asked. Based on these records, he's been deliberately kept in the dark, Dan replied. There's an email here from Tom to Natalie specifically instructing her to exclude Greg from certain client meetings and financial discussions. Then we need to talk to him, I decided, but carefully. We can't be certain of where his loyalties lie. Stephanie checked her watch. I need to get to the courthouse before it closes to file these initial motions. Claire, can you help Rebecca arrange a meeting with Greg? Somewhere discreet where Tom won't hear about it. Claire nodded. I know just the place. While Stephanie headed to the courthouse with our explosive evidence, Claire and I crafted a carefully worded message to Greg. We wanted to alert him to the seriousness of the situation without revealing too much in writing. Finally, we settled on Greg, I need to speak with you privately about the future of Wilson Creative. Some concerning information has come to light that affects both our interests. Can you meet tomorrow? Rebecca Wilson. The response came barely 5 minutes later. I've had concerns myself. Name the time and place. Claire suggested a small breakfast place in a neighboring suburb, far from Wilson Creative's usual territory. Then she insisted on driving me home, worried about my emotional state after the day's revelations. Are you going to be okay tonight? She asked as we pulled up to my house, pretending everything's normal with Tom. I took a deep breath, gathering my composure. I'll manage. I've apparently been living with a stranger for years without realizing it. I can maintain the facade for a few more days. That night was one of the hardest performances of my life. Tom came home earlier than usual, bringing takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant and a bouquet of lilies, my favorite flowers. The guilty gestures of a man preparing to betray his wife, I now recognized. We ate dinner as a family, with our teenagers dominating the conversation with school stories and social drama. Tom played the role of attentive father perfectly, asking thoughtful questions and offering advice that actually wasn't half bad. Looking at him across the dinner table, laughing at our son's joke about his physics teacher, I felt a strange doubling of vision. Here was the man I'd loved for 15 years, the father of my children, my first business partner, and simultaneously, a calculating stranger who had been systematically preparing to discard me both personally and professionally. After the yow, kids went upstairs to do homework. Tom suggested we open a bottle of wine and sit on the back deck. The spring evening was unusually warm, the scent of blooming jasmine filling our carefully landscaped backyard. In another reality, it would have been a perfect moment of marital contentment. I've been thinking, Tom said, swirling the Chardonnay in his glass. Maybe after the Dawson account is settled, we should take a real vacation. Just the two of us. The audacity nearly made me choke on my wine. He was planning our post-anniversary getaway even as he plotted to serve me divorce papers and strip me of my company ownership. What was the vacation supposed to be? A consolation prize? One last hurrah before he revealed that he was leaving me for his 29-year-old mistress? That sounds lovely, I managed to say. Where were you thinking? Maybe Tuscany? You've always wanted to go back since our honeymoon. I nodded, remembering those 2 magical weeks in Italy when we were young and genuinely in love, planning our future together with such optimism. I'd like that. The conversation drifted to safer topics, the children's summer plans, a charity gala we were scheduled to attend in June, neighborhood gossip. All the while, I maintained my mask of contented wife, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm at appropriate moments, playing my part in this farce of a marriage while my mind cataloged every asset, every account, every piece of leverage I could use in the coming battle. When we finally went to bed, I feigned sleep while Tom worked on his laptop beside me, no doubt fine-tuning his plans to destroy everything we'd built together. I listened to his typing, wondering with detached curiosity if he was emailing Natalie, perhaps complaining about having to keep up appearances with his clueless wife for just a few more days. The next morning, after Tom left for work, I drove to meet Greg Campbell at the out-of-the-way breakfast place Claire had suggested. Greg was already there when I arrived, nursing a coffee and looking more tired and stressed than I remembered. He stood when he saw me, his handshake firm but his eyes wary. "Rebecca, it's been too long," he said as we took seats in a secluded corner booth. "You're looking well." "Thank you, Greg. How have you been?" He gave a humorless laugh. "Honestly, increasingly concerned about the state of the company. Things have been strange lately." I nodded, studying him carefully before deciding how much to reveal. "Strange how?" "Financial reports delayed or incomplete. Client meetings I'm not invited to. Staff resources redirected to projects I know nothing about." Greg leaned forward, lowering his voice. And Natalie Parker seems to have unprecedented authority for someone who's only been with us 3 years. Have you spoken to Tom about your concerns? Multiple times. He always has plausible explanations. Efficiency reorganization, specialized project teams, client confidentiality requirements. Greg's frustration was evident. But I'm a 10% owner and chief operations officer. There shouldn't be major company initiatives I'm not aware of. I took a deep breath, making my decision. Greg, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear, but I need to know if you're willing to stand with me against what Tom has been planning. Greg's eyes narrowed. That sounds serious. What exactly has he been planning? Over. The next hour, I laid out everything we'd discovered. The planned ownership dilution, the competing agency Tom and Natalie had established, the diverted resources, the client poaching. With each revelation, Greg's expression darkened, moving from shock to disbelief to cold anger. The bastard, he finally said when I finished. After all these years, after everything we built together. So you didn't know? I had to be certain. Not the full extent, no. I suspected something was off, but this... Greg shook his head in disgust. Using company resources to build a competing business? Approaching our existing clients? That's not just unethical. It's potentially criminal. And he was planning to push both of us out, I added. The restructuring would have reduced my ownership to 5% with no voting rights. According to the documents we found, your position was to be reconsidered once the transition was complete. Greg's laugh was bitter. Reconsidered. That's corporate speak for fired as soon as legally possible. So where do you stand, Greg? I need to know if you're with me in this fight. He met my eyes with newfound resolve, without question. What Tom's doing isn't just a betrayal of you. It's a betrayal of everything Wilson Creative stands for. What's your plan? I outlined what Stephanie, Dan, and Claire had helped me develop. The legal actions already in motion, the evidence, secured, the strategy for countering Tom's maneuvers. As I spoke, I could see Greg's analytical mind working, processing the information and identifying additional angles. There's something else we should consider, he said when I finished. The Dawson account that Tom and Natalie have been working on so intensely? I managed to see some of the preliminary budget numbers. It's massive, potentially the largest client in the firm's history. You think they're planning to land it for Wilson Creative, then transition it to their new agency? I asked. Greg nodded grimly. The timing would be perfect. Sign the deal as Wilson Creative, collect the initial payment, then move the account to Parker Wilson Strategic once they launch. The client might not even realize they're changing agencies if the transition is handled smoothly enough. The calculating ruthlessness of it was almost impressive. Tom had always been strategic, but I'd never witnessed this level of cold-blooded planning from him before. Had Natalie brought out this side of him, or had it always been there, carefully hidden beneath the charming exterior I'd fallen in love with? We need to protect the Dawson opportunity, I said decisively. It rightfully belongs to Wilson Creative, not to Tom and Natalie's new venture. I agree, but how? Tom has deliberately kept me away from all Dawson-related meetings and materials. I considered our options. What do we know about Michael Dawson himself? I've met him at industry events, but Tom always handled the relationship. Dawson's old school, Greg replied. Values personal relationships and business integrity above all else. He's built his company from nothing over 30 years and is very protective of its reputation and legacy. A plan began to form in my mind. So he wouldn't appreciate learning that the agency he's considering hiring is in the midst of an ethical crisis involving client poaching and misappropriation of resources? Greg's eyes widened with understanding. Definitely not, but if we approach him directly, Tom will know immediately that we're on to him. We may not need to approach him directly, I said slowly. Not yet, anyway. Stephanie has already filed for temporary injunctions that would prevent Tom from transferring. any Wilson Creative clients or intellectual property to his new venture. If those are granted, Tom will be legally prohibited from moving the Dawson account even if he lands it. And if Dawson gets wind of potential instability at Wilson Creative, he might delay signing until the situation is resolved, Greg added, catching on to my thinking. Exactly. We just need to find a way to raise legitimate concerns without seeming like we're sabotaging our own company. Greg thought for a moment. Leave that to me. I know someone in Dawson's financial department. I can raise some procedural questions about contract approvals and payment structures that might slow things down without explicitly mentioning any internal conflicts. For the first time since overhearing Tom and Natalie's conversation, I felt a genuine sense of hope. With Greg as an ally, our position was significantly strengthened. He had operational knowledge and internal connections that could prove invaluable in the coming fight. As we prepared to leave, Greg asked the question I'd been dreading. And what about after all this, Rebecca? Assuming we succeed in stopping Tom's plan, what happens to Wilson Creative? I'd been so focused on exposing Tom's betrayal that I hadn't fully considered the aftermath. What did I want for my future, for the company's future? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I do know this. I helped build Wilson Creative from nothing. I stepped back to raise our children, not to surrender my stake in our company. Whatever comes next, I intend to reclaim my place in the business I co-founded. Greg nodded with approval. For what it's worth, I always thought the company lost something valuable when you stepped away from daily operations. Your creative vision balanced Tom's sales focus. We could use that balance again. As we parted ways, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about stopping Tom's betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming my professional identity. About showing Tom, Natalie, and perhaps most importantly myself, that I was far more than just a housewife. I was a businesswoman, an entrepreneur, a creator who had temporarily shifted her focus to family, not surrendered her capabilities. I called Claire as soon as I left the restaurant. Greg's with us, I reported, and he's bringing valuable insights to the table. Is Stephanie back from court yet? Just got in, Claire replied. And she's got news. The judge granted our emergency motions. All Wilson Creative assets are temporarily frozen, and Tom is prohibited from transferring any clients or proprietary information to any other entity. Has he been notified yet? Not yet. The official notification will be delivered to the Wilson Creative offices tomorrow morning. Stephanie requested a 24-hour delay to give us time to prepare for his reaction. My heart raced. So tomorrow everything becomes public. Yes, Claire confirmed. Are you ready for that? Was I ready to openly declare war on my husband of 15 years, the father of my children, my first business partner? Ready to face the personal and professional fallout, the gossip, the difficult conversations with our children and friends? I have to be, I replied, squaring my shoulders even though Claire couldn't see me. He's left me no choice. Back at home, I made a series of preparations for the next day's confrontation. I transferred a significant amount of money from our joint savings account to a new personal account Stephanie had advised me to establish. I gathered important personal documents and family keepsakes, storing them securely at Claire's house. I drafted careful, age-appropriate explanations for our children about the coming changes in our family, and I selected my outfit for the next day with particular care. A sharply tailored navy suit I'd worn to business meetings in my active Wilson Creative days, before Housewife became my primary identity. Tomorrow, when Tom received the legal notifications, I wanted to face him not as his wife of 15 years, but as his equal business partner and adversary. That evening, as we went through the motions of our normal family routine, I studied Tom with new eyes. He seemed slightly on edge, checking his phone more frequently than usual, his conversation distracted. Did he sense something was coming? Had Greg's subtle maneuvers regarding the Dawson account already raised alarms? Everything okay? I asked innocently as we cleaned up after dinner, our teenagers having disappeared to their rooms. What? Oh yeah, fine, Tom replied, obviously distracted. Just a lot happening with the Dawson pitch tomorrow. Final presentation. I'm sure it will go brilliantly, I said, handing him a plate to dry. You've always been great at closing. The big deals. He smiled, some of his confidence returning. Thanks, Becca. This one's particularly important for our future. Our future. The calculated ambiguity of his wording wasn't lost on me. In his mind, our future meant his and Natalie's, not his and mine. The company's future under their leadership, not the shared vision we had once built together. Well, I believe in you, I said, the deliberate irony of my words giving me a small private satisfaction. You've always known exactly what you want and how to get it. Tom seemed pleased by what he took as simple wifely support. I appreciate that, and after tomorrow things are going to get very exciting. On that point, at least, we were in complete agreement. Later, as Tom showered, I sent one final text to our core team, Claire, Dan, Stephanie, and now Greg. Everything in place for tomorrow. T suspects nothing. Legal papers will hit first. Thing in the morning. The responses came quickly. We're ready. Stephanie. Financial evidence all prepared. Dan. I'll be at the office when it happens. Greg. I've got your back, always. Claire. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Tomorrow would change everything. My marriage, my professional identity, my family's future. Tom had set this chain of events in motion with his betrayal, but I would be the one to determine how the story ended. As I heard the shower turn off, I deleted the messages and returned my phone to the nightstand. One last night of pretense, of playing the role of unsuspecting wife. In the morning, I would reclaim my true identity, co-founder, businesswoman, force to be reckoned with. Tom emerged from the bathroom, toweling his hair dry, completely unaware that his carefully constructed plans were hours away from spectacular public collapse. Early start tomorrow, he said, climbing into bed beside me. Big day. I turned off my bedside lamp, allowing the darkness to hide my expression. Indeed it is, Tom. Indeed it is. The morning sun filtered through the blinds as I dressed. In my navy power suit, applying makeup with precision that felt like armor. Today was the day everything would change. I arrived at Wilson Creative's offices just as the courier delivered the legal documents. Perfect timing. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me. It had been months since I'd appeared unannounced. At the company. Mrs. Wilson! What a surprise! Good morning, Jen. Is my husband in? He's in the conference room with the Dawson team and... She hesitated. Ms. Parker. Perfect, I replied, striding toward the conference room, heels clicking purposefully against the hardwood floors. Through the glass walls I could see them. Tom standing confidently at the head of the table, Natalie at his side, both beaming as Michael Dawson nodded appreciatively at whatever they were presenting. Greg sat in the corner, his expression carefully neutral. I paused outside, watching the performance. Tom was in his element, charismatic and persuasive. Natalie gazed at him with undisguised admiration, occasionally adding polished insights of her own. They made a striking team. I had to acknowledge that much. Behind me, the courier approached the reception desk. Delivery for Thomas Wilson and Wilson Creative Group. Requires immediate signature. That was my cue. I pushed open the conference room door, feeling all eyes turned toward me. Rebecca! Tom's surprise quickly morphed into controlled annoyance. We're in the middle of something important. I can see that, I replied pleasantly. Hello, Michael. It's been too long. Michael Dawson stood to greet me with genuine warmth. Rebecca, Tom didn't mention you'd be joining us. It wasn't planned, I said, but given that we're discussing the future of Wilson Creative Group, I thought the company's co-founder should be present. Tom's smile tightened. Becca, this really isn't... He was interrupted by Jen appearing at the door. I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson, but there's an urgent delivery requiring your signature. Perfect timing. I met Greg's eyes across the room, seeing his almost imperceptible nod. We were just wrapping up, Tom said smoothly to Michael. Why don't you and your team take a few minutes to review the proposal while I handle this? As Tom stepped out, I took his vacated position at the head of the table. Natalie shifted uncomfortably, clearly uncertain about this unexpected development. Michael, I said, before you make any decisions, there's something you should know about the current state of Wilson Creative Group. Tom reappeared in the doorway, his face ashen as he clutched the legal documents. Rebecca, a word. Now. In a moment, Tom. I'm just explaining to Michael that Wilson Creative is currently undergoing significant restructuring. Michael looked between us, sensing the tension. Perhaps we should reschedule. That won't be necessary, I assured him. In fact, it's perfect timing. You see, I'm returning to active leadership at Wilson Creative effective immediately. What? Natalie blurted, then composed herself. I mean, that's unexpected. Tom's voice was dangerously low. Rebecca, this is completely inappropriate. What's inappropriate, I countered calmly, is using company resources to establish a competing agency while attempting to dilute the ownership of your business partner. The room fell silent. Michael Dawson's eyebrows shot up. I don't know. What she's talking about, Tom attempted, but his usual confidence was crumbling. I turned to address Michael directly. Wilson Creative Group was founded on principles of creative integrity and ethical business practices. Those principles remain our core values, regardless of recent distractions. Greg stepped forward. As Chief Operations Officer, I can confirm that moving forward, Wilson Creative will be undergoing leadership restructuring to reaffirm these values. Natalie gathered her papers hastily. This is ridiculous. Tom, are you going to let them? Ms. Parker, I interrupted. Given that you've been named in legal proceedings regarding misappropriation of company resources, I suggest you consult your attorney before making any further statements. The color drained from her face. Michael Dawson, shrewd businessman that he was, assessed the situation quickly. Tom, it seems you have some internal matters to resolve. I appreciate your presentation, but I think we'll take some time to consider all options. Michael, please. Tom began, but Dawson was already gathering his team to leave. I'll be in touch, he said, nodding respectfully to me before departing. As the door closed behind the Dawson team, Tom turned to me, fury replacing shock. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Recovered my company? Protected my assets? Exposed your betrayal? I suggested. Take your pick. This isn't over, he threatened. You're right about that, I agreed. The divorce papers are being delivered to the house as we speak. His face contorted with a mixture of rage and panic. You can't do this. I smiled, feeling 15 years of supporting him from the shadows transform into newfound strength. Actually, I can. You see, that's the thing about being just a housewife. We notice everything, remember everything, and when necessary, fight for everything that matters. Turning to Greg, I said, "Shall we begin the emergency board meeting?" As I took my rightful seat at the head of the conference table, I caught Natalie's stunned expression. She had gravely underestimated the housewife who had built this company from nothing. A mistake she wouldn't have the opportunity to make again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.